First of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming to listen to me today. As you all know, I'm here today because my uncle was arrested, tortured, and he eventually died in Chinese prison. And I have sacrificed a great deal, leaving my 6-year-old daughter and my mother and my sisters back in Tibet. And I have come here to tell the world what is exactly happening inside Tibet. I believe you all know about my uncle, so I won't get into the detail, but I'd like to tell you that my uncle did nothing against the Chinese law. All he did was follow the advice of His Holiness, and he was arrested on a charge that was fabricated by the Chinese. My uncle wanted to set up school in a region for the nomads and their children. And at the beginning, the Chinese government refused to give him permission, and he made appeals in Beijing and everywhere he could to get the necessary permission so that the children of the nomads could get education. Sane karika sakala ina gomba chigma pendo rono gomba jigodna na roba chig rawa tadi tasa roba chela rawa dun kale mombo chena roba chi peji la tudi pechi tudi chude rango tsuso itama je pechi la ka kosan rona roba chig tala chuchi chiradi sane kasa kala gomba mombo chi doji rawa ri. So my uncle made appeals everywhere he could so that he could build schools and then monasteries. So during that time, my uncle traveled to Beijing and he made a petition to the relevant authority so that he could build monasteries. And in that petition, he told the Chinese authorities that in the 1950s that the Chinese
Communist Party had already agreed to give authority to the Tibetans to build monasteries. So he didn't see any reason why he wasn't being given the permission now. So he did everything he could to get the permission. So during that time, her uncle also got to meet the late Tenzin Lama, and with his help, he was able to get permission to build monasteries. My uncle was a highly regarded Lama in Tibet. And my uncle was finally arrested on a trumped-up charge for something he didn't do. And while he was in prison, he and his supporters and his family made different appeals so that he could be released. So even before his arrest, actually, Rinpoche's movement was very much restricted. Even though he was not doing anything against the law, he was not transgressing the Chinese law, but his movement was very restricted, and he wasn't allowed to go to other regions to give Buddhist teachings. And in 2002, my uncle, along with one of his students, was arrested on a charge because there had been in that region a bomb blast, and they were charged they were arrested on that charge. And in 2003, Losang Tendru was executed, and my uncle was handed down death sentence. And due to international outcry and appeals from his family and his supporters, my uncle's death sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment. My uncle was arrested for something he didn't do, and the Chinese authorities did not have any proof to substantiate that arrest.
Rinpoche tama ngya Rinpoche jedi da soda ngazo namu chiko kin jedi da sono Rinpoche ga daringa kai khamu ko na daji zil kundangi daji zil Rinpoche kasu chane sana jana jungu tsuna Rinpoche dei mise Rinpoche ge jawa da shidu da ganze jugu go khala Goni Daji Nemeji, or Mobachi Jana Robachilla, Tamachi Tuju.
After 8 months of his being, of my uncle's being imprisoned, he was allowed to meet my family.
The Robachin had to the Robachikichilana, Nalatari, Nieto Pachaka, Yamasi, Dunto, Sato Mapin, Chiquita, Chirota, Doshi to the knee, Dracom here, watching do not Dracom, Conk to the Soya.
And when my family met him during that time, my uncle told my family that he was being tortured, beaten inside prison, and but for some reason he never felt any kind of resentment towards the prison authorities that were torturing him, that were beating him. Instead, he always felt pity for them.
Robachiga, Darinala, Jana Jugo, Nani to Stingy, there is on Geniel. Darinala Jana Jugo, Nani to Stingy, Jama Robachiga, Gazuti, and Mala, good Hutchinson, Nani to read.
And my uncle also said that I have done nothing against the Chinese law, and I have not transgressed any of their law. All I have done is follow the advice of His Holiness, and then this is what I've been wanting to spread to the people in Tibet. But despite that, I've been arrested and I've been imprisoned.
Rinpoche Chen Woki so you could told them, Rinpoche Lama Poji told them, Rinpoche Piaja told them, Sutran the Beji, thought Message Twa Taja, Rinpoche Kola Shidu, Motu the Jokes, Jana Junguti, and Drumati, Jana Jungumo, Donji Geore, Gangi Geore, Roses legend and the poor Daway, poor Machietans on the Zore.
Even though the people living in Lithang, the region where Rinpoche belonged, the living standard of the people there was not very good. But despite that, many times they traveled to Beijing to appeal to the government so that Rinpoche can be released. But instead of addressing the grievances of the people, the Chinese authorities instead punished them in the sense that many were imprisoned, many were beaten, and many who were receiving some help from the financial help from the government were cut off.
Ma Trung Kala Amada Anika to such an Mona Chimbil Hamachataba, Chisu, 32 Jews, only 2 Juliana, 2 Jew married.
And about 10 days before the death of my uncle, all of a sudden the Chinese authorities informed my mother that she would be allowed to meet him. And my mother and my aunt immediately traveled to Chengdu, where he was in a prison at that time. But when my mother and my aunt got there, the prison authorities kept postponing the meeting, and they never actually got to meet him.
Did you Robachic to it, you learn the Java, it does good do Marcel, Catia, Marilla, Mobile, do Jedi, some quality, and much jail.
And not only that, my mother and my aunt never got to meet my uncle, but all of a sudden one day they just informed my mom and my uncle, the Chinese authorities informed my mom and my aunt that my uncle had died. And during that time, I was back at home, and I also traveled to Chengdu, and many of his supporters and students appealed to the prison authorities to get Rinpoche's body back. But the Chinese authorities not only did not return Rinpoche's body to the family, but they didn't even return his ash to the family.
Kotka go Rinpoche de Yethala Rawachi in the Tobulare Rawaina Hoto Sijur Dina Rinpoche Hamachatam Hamachanga Rachu the Tavarula Zeti Rawani Bada Moto Rinpoche Kuduma Dina Hotala Ju Medina Medela Rawa Sambatala Moto Rinpoche Moto Kurmaglam Mamari Rinpoche Moto Baba Tamaglam at the date Shinotraka Zachi Tongurilla Lama Yomari that's Sambat Rinpoche Kotogo Drozme Kotogo Hiji Tong Hemba the Tin Mozilla Hemba Dati Zos Yet Mozilla Jiru Lana the Tina Jawa Yahi the Jawa Chichang Drew Mari.
So my uncle and my aunt and the other supporters and other family members requested the Chinese authorities that they be allowed to see the body of my uncle. And they also requested if, since the Chinese authorities had been telling them that my uncle had died of under natural circumstances, and in that case, my uncle told the Chinese, my mother told the Chinese authorities, in that case, they be given a medical certificate to corroborate their whatever they had been telling them.
The Hitijila Rinpoche could do it in just on your work side and the same moment Utun the Jin Jason Roger Tosh did us in Jason, but the same moment you could do some so the Rinpoche gave to the number to Jia, Akujo, and could do somebody Rinpoche is some Napoli and a court go to the soul, the Naina, Rodi Rinpoche, Jason, Rodi Rinpoche, here with the Rinpoche to the Nana, Rinpoche. To the sea or son, what's going on when you kill.
And finally, when the Chinese prison authorities did not allow them to see Rinpoche's body, my mother hit her head against the wall and she started bleeding. And then I tried to commit suicide by tying my scarf around my neck. And only then we were allowed to see my uncle's body for a few moments. And before that, some of his students were allowed to clean his body, and they had noticed that Rinpoche's lips and his nails were unusually black. And I also noticed that his nails and his lips were black as the students had told me. So this brings me to believe that my uncle did not die of he did not die under natural circumstance.
Rinpoche there's a Hujilo. Mobo Zanko the jury to Rinpoche there's a Janajungo Chilurana. Kaisers and Yachi de Chatam, Lama Zamajiri, Chitul Nushi Jiri, Chime Lumachu. Mama called Chotit at Zore, Google said, Lama Chotit, Chotit that you marry. Rubichigo, Jakaka, Rubichi Jaka, Kashi, Rubichi Jaka Sagan, Rubichi Jaka on Sayo.
The Chinese authorities did not only harass my uncle when he was alive, but even after he died, they didn't leave him alone. They started circulating information saying that my uncle was a fake monk, and that he was a splittist, and that he was against China. And we wanted to actually, we have a tradition of building stupas when lamas die, and my uncle's students and supporters wanted to build a stupa in his name, and the Chinese authorities did not allow that to be done. And we wanted to offer butter lamps, and we were not even allowed to do that.
the Rinpoche got a lot of the Kelly to Marilla. Rinpoche got Karamagla Mari, but Jagala Mahidi, Samala. Did you the mood to the Gabra was in your Rai? Hard tell you. What got a Janet in the sea and I wanted to tell you Kelly to Somalia.
So I still cannot digest the fact that my uncle was so brutally assassinated by the Chinese. All he had done was philanthropic work. He had set up schools, he had set up hospitals, he had set up orphanages, and he had set up old age homes for the people in his region. So it is very difficult for me to accept the fact that my uncle is no more, and that he had to suffer so much despite not doing anything against the law of the country.
Tenzin Sambat da Janaju, Genkhang da Janaju la Hienu Chula, Gesitin Haka Sandu Hot Song, Namatrika, Salahiina, Kotokuma Dabo, Juzuji, Tanazana Washka, Tanazana Kelly Taga, Gojik, Tarishimo Maradi Garden, Kotala, Hubo, the Guchuji, Drugo, Kotan, Dami Ilana, Chinkango, Utugo, Juri, the Gatan Gochiga, the Lady Dunk, Gochiga, the Lady Tunazona, Mochama Hashu. One of the Chitan and I in the sun, and other Sambala, China, something, what if that chin the chicken gave me?
So after my uncle's death, apparently the Chinese officer that was in our town had a meeting with his officials, and the decision, and they took a certain decision, and in that decision they told my family member that if they ever got out of Tibet and that they spoke to the world about Rinpoche, that they would be severely punished, and that they also said that if they ever went to Beijing to make any kind of appeal relating to Rinpoche's death, they would be severely punished.
The India, Markamatsi Punola, Nimobachi Romochi, Druid Yatsu, don't you Mobuchi, Ravri, Kami Mobachi Chin. That's on the Kami Mobachi Yawri.
So, the case of my uncle, unfortunately, is not a unique case. There are many families who have undergone the suffering I have, and there are many people who still have family members in prison. There are many people who share similar fate as myself, but unfortunately, not all of them have the opportunity that I have, and many people do not have they cannot share. They do not have the opportunity to tell the world what is going on inside Tibet. So I feel it is my responsibility to tell my story to the people of the free world, and I hope that one day truth will prevail.
Rinpoche kadino lachatan yejon zaton neta da hakore rubag neta hakore zambili neta hakore mutala lachatar tsam naina shemre nina loje jeni sharke hieme hidende sabal masan hiepomanen
I'm not educated, so I'd like to apologize if I made any mistakes in telling my story. I have not had any experience of speaking in public in the past, so I'd like to apologize in advance.
Я тут ночью как я чего-то дивлю. Ранее сама и на зоате леди кошка говорила, что девочка говорила дивлю.
So the people inside Tibet have a lot of hope on the people of the free world, and if all of those who have self-immolated in Tibet to protest against the Chinese policies have a lot of expectation on the outside world. And I hope you will not disappoint them. And I would like to thank you all for your support and all the campaign work that you carried out for my uncle. And the only thing the people inside Tibet are hoping for is to see the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and to see him once before they die.
How did the Dalai Lama?